Pinellas County is home to the Florida Botanical Gardens, and it's also home to the many dedicated volunteers that maintain the grounds there. They're known as Master Gardeners. Inside, Pinellas reporter Libby Bowling has the story of one Master Gardener whose dedication to work and unyielding creativity changed Pinellas County and world history.
Longtime Pinellas County volunteer and Master Gardener Sam Skemp Jr. has had his hands in some extraordinary projects over his lifetime. Here at the Florida Botanical Gardens, his pet volunteer project, the formal Rose Garden, is a favorite venue for many area brides. Skemp's interest in horticulture, like many of his other interests, was developed in childhood. His meticulous care of the notoriously temperamental hybrid varieties reveals much about his nature. Skemp is a man of details, but he's also a man of vision.
Well, I've always been a believer in being creative and thinking ahead and how to make things better, that sort of thing. That's always been my ambition, to do something better.
I had the opportunity to visit with the 85-year-old at his home in Seminole and talk about his life, a life and a career that could be taken straight from a best-selling Cold War-era thriller. You see, before Skemp was a volunteer Master Gardener, he attained the rank of colonel in the U.S. Army, serving his country during a time in history that's unrivaled in its strategic importance to our national security and the race into space.
I think the most exciting moment was when I first launched the Jupiter nose cone and it was successful. That was the most exciting thing because nobody had ever brought anything back from space, ever. And that was the very first return from space.
The project, the Redstone Missile Warhead. Skemp worked under Werner von Braun with the Army Ballistic Missile Agency at the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, from 1956 through 1958. It was Skemp's ablation technique, protecting the nuclear warhead from the intense heat of re-entry, that made these long-range tactical nuclear weapons possible. And it's this same ablation technique that made manned space flight possible, protecting the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts during their return to Earth. Earlier on, from 1952 to 1955, Skemp was project officer in the Office of the Chief of Ordnance for Tactical Nuclear Weapons, managing and developing multiple nuclear warheads, including the first portable tactical nuclear weapon known as the atomic cannon. The weapon was first tested on May 25, 1953 in Nevada with great success. Skemp moved on to work on the Explorer 1 satellite, launched from Cape Canaveral on January 31, 1958. The Pershing 1 missile, creating the initial design, and in the 70s as project manager on the Pershing 2. Worked with NATO in the early 60s, coordinating research in fluid dynamics, aeroballistics, and spaceflight, advising Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy along the way. From 1966 to 1969, Skemp served as missile advisor for the Secretary of the Army and the Army Chief of Staff, conducting air defense, ballistic missile defense, and ballistic missile systems analysis, ultimately advising President Richard Nixon to initiate strategic arms limitation talks with the Soviets. Those talks led to the first strategic arms limitation treaty with the Soviet Union and, eventually, the end of the Cold War.
Thank you. It was a completion of a successful period, and it was a good time to end that period. That was the nice part about it. It ended it.
Skemp comes from a long line of military service. His father, Samuel C. Skemp III, was an enlisted man in the cavalry, serving under General John J. Pershing back in 1916 as part of the Mexican expedition to capture Pancho Villa, the notorious Mexican revolutionary. It was during that conflict that Skemp's father first saw and eventually flew in one of the Army's 3 airplanes. Skemp III was hooked and joined the Air Corps as soon as he could, becoming a second lieutenant in the process. Skemp's father was eventually promoted to major and was stationed in the Canal Zone in Panama at France Field. And in 1927, when Skemp Jr. was just a child, the family had a remarkable visitor. Charles Lindbergh paid a visit just after his famous transatlantic flight, staying at the Skemp home.
I can remember being on that pier, holding his hand and watching my father flying above in his amphibian plane, doing stunts up there. And I can't forget that. I was 2.5 years old then, but I can't forget it. It was very impressive to be with him.
Born at a time when it seemed all things were possible, Skemp has bridged his father's legacy of early flight with his own legacy, opening the world to possibilities of peace and a broadening of our sense of place in the universe.
I hadn't really thought of it in that aspect, but I was just trying to be creative. It's always better if you have a challenge and you have to do something.
Right, right. From Seminole, I'm Libby Bowling for Inside Pinellas.
I think that's about it. I hope I didn't ruin your camera.
Thanks, Libby. What an amazing life. And Sam's an amazing volunteer, too. Sam was recently recognized at Pinellas County's Celebrating People in Action Awards ceremony for contributing more than 20,000 hours, more than anyone in volunteer services history. Carol Suggs has known Sam since 1998.
Sam is the most dedicated Master Gardener volunteer out of the 200 and some that I've known since I've been here. He's here just like clockwork, Tuesday and Friday, working in the rose garden, and he's just a shining star, and he deserves all the credit in the world, and hope he remains for many more years.
And so do we. If you'd like to join people like Sam Skemp Jr. in volunteering with Pinellas County, just visit pinellascounty.org/volunteer and fill out the convenient online application.